Okay, perfect. Can everyone online hear me all right? And get a thumbs up. There. I see Jim Larkin giving me a thumbs up. Hi, Jim. A lot of the other people disappeared, so Brad will have to let me know what everybody's saying. Oh, I see another thumbs up on there. And hello to everyone in the room as well. My name is Casey Humphrey. I am an associate professor in the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy. And this today is the first of two of the certification series for relationship-rich education. And kind of how this came to be was there was a PLC that Rusty Carpenter did a while ago. It's probably been a couple of years now, where we read the book by Peter Felton and Lambert, and we'll talk about that, about relationship-rich education and how we could implement it into our courses, and whether EKU was moving towards a relationship-rich environment, and how we were and maybe how we were not, and what challenges that brought. And I immediately bought into it. So if you've ever done the 5 passive leadership that EKU uses a lot, I'm relational, like to like a problem area. Like it's like all I can use, you know, like relational, and that's all, 0 on all the other things. And so I was just like, this is good stuff. It's usable stuff, and it's stuff that I think should carry more value in higher education. And so since then, we've had a couple of PLCs, and PLCs are, you know, they're harder for people to attend because they require the whole semester. But we still got some really good kind of pilot projects out of it and some good feedback. So we thought that maybe trying to synthesize it down into a little bit of a smaller compacted series would be able to touch more people, and more people could attend. So thank you all for coming. Hopefully you'll get something good out of it. My contact information is there on the bottom of the first slide if you want to contact me in the future or just want to reach out and chat at some point. Okay, so like I said, this is the book, The Relationship Rich, How Human Connections Drive Success in College, by Peter Felton and Lambert. And Brad's going to post a website there in the chat for you online folks. But the Elon University website is Peter Felton's kind of, like, that's where he houses a lot of information about the book and the work that he's done. And so it's something that you might want, if you're interested in it and you want to order the book or you want to learn more about the book. There's a lot of overviews on this website, and we may go back to it and talk about it a little bit more depending on how much time that we have. But I just wanted you all to have this in case you wanted information in the future about it. Since this book, Felton and Lambert have written another book that it has an online option only, like you can read it online for free, or you can purchase it, and it is more from the perspective of the college student, where this book is more of the perspective of how an educator should build relationships. And you can connect through that second book as well on that website, I believe. So everything we talk about today is really going to come out of this book. So that's kind of, if you want to reference, the book is the reference. Everything, it's not my ideas, it's their ideas. So we'll kind of start off. I feel like I'm going to make the assumption, and you all can tell me if I'm wrong, that if you are here, you're either interested in building relationships with your students. You feel like that's important already, I think. And you are likely probably already doing relationship rich things in your courses, maybe not calling them that, but just the fact that you're here to me means that you likely probably already are. I doubt that there's anybody that's like, I'm just a super mean person. I don't like to talk to anyone, but I just thought I'd randomly come to this deal. I doubt that that's the case. If it is, cool, you know, you can hang out too. But I don't think that's true. So what do you all think when you hear relationship rich education? Like, what did you think it was? And what do you think you're already doing that's relationship rich? And Brad gave me this cool little box, and I can throw it to you and you can speak if you're in the room.
Pass this one around.
And it will, oh, there's another one, and Brad can pass it around too. So anybody online or just here, like, what do you think relationship rich education is, and what are you doing with relationship rich already?
I don't mind to share, Casey.
Go ahead.
Okay, let me start my video. I just raced home so I could listen to this before another webinar. But before I read the book, I thought relationship rich education really was kind of, as the name says, like building relationships. And I know in the College of Health Sciences, we use a lot of our leveraging of professional networks. So building relationships with practitioners, having students as leaders. I feel like in the College of Health Sciences and our program, that's really what we focus on with relationship rich education.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we get to the principles, that will fall in perfectly for building a web of relationships. That's a perfect example of one of the principles. Anybody else think they're already doing relationship rich education? Yeah.
It's hard to say. I mean, part of the reason I'm teaching some of these online sections that have 150, 160 students in it. And at the same time, I'm teaching some courses, some independent studies and practica where students work in my lab. I'm supervising theses. I'm on master's committees, and, you know, more or less have an open door policy. If students need to talk, they can come talk, and we talk. I try to make time at the end of my classes, at the beginning of my classes, talk to students and get to know them. I mean, I'm pretty casual. With, you know, I try to be approachable. You know, I fail a lot of times with that, but you know, it's hard with, I teach some classes in statistics for psychology majors, and so nobody majors in psychology that do statistics. So that there's a little bit of that. But yeah, so I think I'm doing it, and I think I've been, you know, I used to teach at a liberal arts college, and that was the whole game. That was it, right? Relationship, that was the deal. And I hear a lot of talk about it here, and I like the idea. You know, I haven't read the book or anything like that, but for these large, especially online classes, I've been able to work with one online student in the past 10 years on a research project. And just by the numbers, I've taught way more people online than I have in person. But when I think about, you know, getting to know them, working with them, helping them, you know, get projects done so they can get jobs, get into grad school and stuff, I haven't been able to do it. I have no idea how.
Right.
You know, the on-campus student, though, it's been completely different. And every time I teach a section of, you know, a stats course, or, you know, I teach courses in sensory systems, you know, I'll get one or two students who want to work in my lab and go and do other stuff. And so, you know, I'm just trying to figure out how it all fits.
Yeah.
You know, I like the general idea of relationship rich education. It's just, how do you make it work in this environment? And I had 600 advisees last semester. Yeah.
That's a lot. And
no, 300, sorry. The new person has 600. I stepped away from that position. The new person has 600, sorry.
That's still a lot. That's still plenty.
Yeah.
No, and there is a whole chapter in this book called Why Is It So Hard? That's the whole chapter. And so I think that it is easy to sit in a room like this and say, we need to be relationship rich educators. Building relationships are important, but it is not. It's easier said than done. It's one of those things that I feel like it's like, of course, you know, we should do that. Go to your class and go do that. but there's really no, there are a lot more challenges to that than we give it credit for. And there's an entire chapter devoted on that, and we'll cover that a little bit today. There's a lot of challenges to becoming relationship rich.
When we're talking about relationship rich education in this context, sorry.
Oh.
Nope, you're all right. There you go.
Are we thinking about just like professor-student relationship or student-to-student relationship?
The book considers them both relationship rich. So yes, yes to both.
Okay, that was in thinking about the like expectation with students. Like I can only do so much with 30 something students, but thinking about fostering more of that interconnectedness as well.
And that's definitely a part of it, is how are we facilitators and how are we fostering other relationships for that student? Because absolutely, you're not having a relationship with 300 advisees, but how are we setting up 300 students to build relationships outside of just us? And how are we creating that culture? And so ultimately that's, you know, the desire is to move towards that more as a culture versus it falling just on one person's plate individually. Great. Those are all really great examples. And I think everyone brought up some great points about what the challenges might be to for relationship rich education. I'm very much rose-colored glasses. Like I'm like, sure, we can do it. And then other people are like, you know, students, we teach you. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. But I've come to learn that it is more challenging than just being like, yes, I'm going to do this. And I think it does come more naturally to some than others. However, I think it can always be learned and improved upon, even for people who may not feel like it comes as naturally to them. So this book, one of the quotes is that relationships are the beating heart of the undergraduate experience. And that is from the first page of the book. I would add that they are the beating heart of undergraduate and graduate experiences, because I would argue, I only teach graduate students, but I would argue that graduate students, particularly in their first year, are experiencing some of the same challenges that undergraduates are experiencing on their first day of classes. So there's a new level of expectation for them. A lot of times they're having new faculty that maybe they haven't had before. We may have students coming into graduate school here that have not been on this campus before. They're not necessarily moving from undergraduate to graduate experience at the same university all the time. And so a lot of those anxieties that we see with first year college students, which is really the focus of this particular book, I would argue we see with students at the beginning of their graduate experience too. And I think that experience kind of follows them, right? Like they're still going to have the need for these relationships even when they're in their fourth year of undergraduate. So I don't think it just ends there in the undergraduate experience. But specifically, the reason that relationships are so important now, and I'm kind of preaching to the choir, you all know this, you know that higher education is changing. We have more diversity within our students, which is a great thing, but it's definitely an area that has to be addressed and brings its own challenges. We have students that are working more and more. We have more students that are parents. We have more needs for academic accommodations. We know that we're having students coming in that are less college ready than maybe they previously were before. And so it's wonderful to hear that more people have access to college now, and that we're creating a space that more students are being able to access something they may not have thought that they could previously access. However, that brings the need for us to change and how we're interacting with those students. And when I say us, please know that I am referring to the proverbial us in the sense of a university, a higher ed culture. I don't think that this falls just on the faculty, or it should not just fall on the faculty. Also, the demands on faculty and staff are changing, and I think that we all feel that. I feel like we continuously feel like there's more expectations put on faculty and staff, that we have to navigate those student needs more, that we're expected to be more flexible in how we engage with students while also maintaining a level of rigor in their study. And I think that there is not language available to reward faculty that are really good at building relationships. And so that's one of the things that I like about this book, is because it presents relationship-rich education as a pedagogy, as an actual approach to learning that I think that then can be used to foster language in our P&T to say what we're doing. In that teaching section of P&T, if we can present that we are, good relationship-rich educators, that's a level of pedagogy that is a reward for faculty that are really good at it, that may not have previously been available to us. And I thought that was important. Okay, so there are 4 main principles in the book, and I'm going to go over these, and then we'll kind of talk about what you all have experienced under each one. The first one is every student must experience genuine welcome and deep care. And I feel like that's kind of like a obvious one, right? We want students to feel welcome when they come here. We want students to feel welcome in our classes. The book talks about, though, that people don't just automatically feel welcome. They don't just, you can't just come in and introduce yourself and say, hey, I'd love to chat, come see me. Students don't necessarily accept that as a genuine welcome and deep care. So the book talks about really going that extra step, learning their names, meeting them where they are and reaching out to them versus just creating this expectation that they're going to feel welcomed by you just for the fact that you're there in the room. The next one is every student must be inspired to learn. And essentially what the book says about this is that, unfortunately, I hate to burst your all's bubble, but not every student is taking your class because they're super pumped about taking stats. It's just not the case. And that's okay, because we know that they're going to leave with information that is going to help them along the way. But one of the principles of relationship-rich education is that inspiring students to learn about content that they maybe didn't think was important is a piece that really kind of fosters that relationship. Things that spark students to learn, and then creating communities that are inspiring students to learn within that, that content that you're trying to teach them. One of the things I did, I'll give an example of this. We did a pilot project through one of the PLCs where everyone implemented something, and we will get to that and encourage you all to implement something as well. But I teach brain injury rehab is one of the classes I teach. So that's very specific. Most occupational therapy students don't come to OT school because they want to be a brain injury rehab therapist. Most of them want to be peds or general rehab. Brain injury is just like very specific. So when they end up in my class, a lot of times they're like, this isn't what I want to do. Not a lot of people do this. But I just have to suffer through Dr. Humphrey's class anyway, because this is where I ended up. And so I decided that I was going to do kind of a current event series about the impact of brain injury outside of just the treatment of brain injury. So I brought in, I would try to start every session with a current event. One was a situation in Kentucky where like a teenage boy was doing parkour on the top of buildings. Do you want to know what that is? Like jumping across buildings. Bad idea, generally speaking, but kids make bad decisions. And unfortunately he fell and got a brain injury. And as part of that, it was impactful to the whole community. So the whole community, the school system had to bring in counselors, and the church that this child went to did fundraisers, and still it's years out. And I have still found things where the community is still really working towards the recovery of this one person. And so when you look at treating just that injury, it seems very narrow. But when you look at the injury, that it's really affecting an entire community and multiple people, it really seems like there's more impact. And so I did that as a piece of inspiring to learn. And that's just one example, but I would try to find examples of that to where I could show how brain injury like affected multiple people. Like Dr. Dre had a brain injury. If anybody is interested in knowing that. So just things to make students understand that this is just not happening in Dr. Humphrey's world, but this is happening in the world around us. And so it's interesting to learn about that. So that's one example of inspiring to learn, and something that could be used with a larger class with multiple students. Another principle is every student must develop a web of significant relationships. And Laurel gave a great example of this, of where you're connecting the student with supports or relationships that might be outside of you specifically. So you're creating a path for the students to develop other relationships outside of just that one-on-one faculty-student relationship. And so the book really, talks about how they don't have to have a relationship with you specifically. You just have to have a culture to let students build a relationship with somebody, because that's how they stay in school and that's how they are successful. And that's why they don't want to leave, is because they don't want to leave the people. Most students are not like, I really don't want to leave that math class. I would love to finish that math class. It's not most of the time when they're struggling, they're like, but I don't want to leave my friends. I don't want to leave my band. I don't want to leave my sport. I don't want to leave my sorority or fraternity. That's what they don't want to leave. And those are the things that get them through that math class or that English class or whatever it is, that anatomy class for my students that really struggle. And then every student must explore questions of meaning and purpose. And the book talks about how we all think of college as this, like asking the big questions, challenging our minds, like thinking big. And that's really difficult to do if you don't have a relationship with somebody to explore those questions, because you're often not going to explore those questions in a room of 40 people. But you may be able to explore big questions when one-on-one with a faculty member or something like that. So that is how the principal talks about really giving the students opportunities to ask meaningful questions, to be able to really get to the heart of that college experience instead of just drifting aimlessly kind of through their classes. Okay, and so this is the why is it so hard? You can't see it on the PowerPoint because people's lovely faces are covering it up, but the title of the slide is Why Is It So Hard? And the whole book kind of talks about, yes, it's all well and good. You tell us to do all those things, but that's not so easy. And there are all kinds of individual and situational factors. Students, it talks a lot about students have imposter syndrome. So yeah, you can tell them to come to your office, but the likelihood of them thinking that they have a smart question to come to your office is probably not the case. You know, particularly an undergrad student is probably not going to do that. And then there's institutional challenge. Traditional classrooms are not relational. And the curriculum doesn't always allow for it. And again, back to the whole the P&T thing, we don't have a lot of reward systems in place that value faculty that take the time to implement these things. So there's all these factors that make it more difficult than maybe it needs to be. So I think relationship-rich education is possible with intentionality. And with effort. And I think we have to move towards a culture of that. So is there anything that you all can kind of think of that you have seen EKU doing to foster these type of relationships, or are you all doing anything in your departments that you think fall under those principles? Yeah.
This just happened last night with one of my students. And plus I'm in a situation to where I hear a lot of the things that are going on campus. We know that there's an uptick in mental health issues in our students. And I think there's a big surge at the university to make sure that faculty know where to find resources to help their students. In every aspect. Like I did a thing on fourth week progress reporting the other day, and it's like, yeah, this is great. As a faculty member, yes, I need to know how to do this, but how do I help my students after with those outcomes, with those results? And just last night, I had a student emailing or texting me at 11 o'clock. And like, I've told them from day one, you're not alone. You have resources here. And somewhere throughout the week, I'm talking about mental health issues, like letting them know I'm not just saying that, you know, like I'm here for you. And so I had to use it last night. Like, what other resources are available? Are you going to hurt? Are you okay right now? Do I need to come to you? And they really appreciated that. But I think I was really appreciative. I was telling Rusty about it today. I'm really appreciative as a faculty member that the university has had, like I could put student supports at EKU, and there's a whole list, whether it's the Knoll Studio, mental health supports, social activities. And I think there's a big push for that to where we can access resources so we can be more relationship rich with our students.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the university has seen the need for more supports and has tried to invest in those, and that is helpful in building a relationship rich. Anything else that you've seen your departments do? Or my department for occupational therapy is really promotes the student organizations. There are very few students who are not in the student organizations, and when they're not, we're like, why are you not in the student organization? And it's low cost, there's not a lot of demands, but it gives them kind of it just gives them a group outside of their classes and their faculty to really feel like they have a connection to the program itself. And so that's something that we do. Yeah, right. Somebody in the chat.
Jim has his hand up.
Oh, yes, Jim.
Our department chair has been really vocal about all of us faculty getting to know the names of the students within the first, I think the first month was the goal. And in previous years, it was just kind of assumed we would get to know their names, and eventually you'll get to know their names. But our department chair is just saying, be intentional and get to know those names fast. And so it's been a it's tough to do. You gotta be intentional with it. You have to go through that roster and look at the faces, look at the names. I'm doing attendance every day now and just having them going through and looking at the name, looking at the face. And I've got labs as well. So the labs also help with getting to know the faces with the names. And then it just makes it does make a big difference when you know the name, and then you can just say, hey, Susan, how's your week been? How was your weekend? And I find it just makes a huge difference.
I completely agree. And John McChesney should be teaching this, not me, because he is so good at, which for you all who you all don't know, Dr. McChesney is Jim's department chair of press in the College of Health Sciences, but he's so good at being intentional with learning people's names, or doing just small acts of kindness, sending an email to encourage someone, or seeing something that he knows is of interest for somebody, and then, bringing like a magazine article, or, one time I did something in the college, and he's not in my department, but he put a little coupon to a pizza place in my mailbox. And so those little things, and that's a great example of on like as a boss or somebody who's over you, really fostering that relationship with the faculty. Whereas we're kind of in that same situation, like we're the instructor with power, trying to foster that relationship with our students who are kind of under us. And getting to know somebody's name is not the easiest thing to do, but it is really helpful. The students really like it, even though it does take effort, and it does take a lot of intentionality.
And Casey, you mentioned Dr. McChesney, and he is, I have to just applaud him. He really is amazing when it comes to relationship rich, being a relationship rich chairperson. And he makes us feel like we're a family. He's given us cards, anniversary cards, birthday cards, just little accomplishments. He gives you these compliments all the time, and I know how it makes me feel. It makes me feel really good and part of the department, a valuable part of the department. So I'm taking that and realizing that it makes me feel good. It's going to make the students feel good if I replicate that in the classroom.
Yes, I completely agree. And so bringing that back to a large classroom size, because it's one thing when you have 20 people under you, right? You can send everyone a card, but when you have 130 or however many, more than that, 600, it's really difficult. But one thing that I saw someone do that I thought in one of our PLCs, and this was an online, it was Nadeem did it as an online thing, is he would pick 3 or 4 every week, 3 or 4 people who did really well, and give them kind of a shout out in his weekly lecture. And just like, did everyone see Annette's post? It was really good and really thoughtful. Go check it out. Did anyone see Laurel's idea? It was unique, and did 3 or 4 of those, and didn't get to the entire class. There's really was no way that this person was going to shout out the entire class. But it was a way that the students felt like, oh, he's recognizing us when we do something good, and then made kind of an added effort to recognize maybe a student who wasn't the A+ student, that he knew wasn't going to get recognized traditionally, but maybe was like, oh, but they had a really good point. Maybe it's not an A assignment, maybe it's a C assignment, but this one point they made was really good, and made an effort to kind of highlight those in a way to just make sure that every week, 3, 4, 5 people were going to get acknowledged some way. And so that I thought that was a great way to do like a larger class size. check the time. Let's see. So small changes really do have a big impact. And I've given some examples, but I really just want to take the rest of the time. One of the things about this series is what we want is for you all to kind of take these ideas, use those resources, that online website, and kind of dig in a little deeper if you have time about relationship rich education, but then think about small ways that you can implement into your class. And it's not expected that you would go change your syllabus or take out an assignment. That's not what we're expecting. But thinking about ways that you can, without spending a lot of your time, creating a culture where you can build more relationships, and then doing those over the semester, and thinking intentionally about doing those things, and then thinking about what kind of response you're getting from the students. And then when we come back for our second session series, we're going to talk about what outcomes we've seen, what challenges we faced, what things went well, what we thought was easier, and then maybe things that we thought ended up being harder. So that's kind of what the idea of this is, that you would kind of take this information, hopefully try to use it in some capacity, and then we'll come back together and talk about how it was used, how we think that we could continue to add in relationship rich concepts into our classes moving forward. And because of that, I wanted to kind of give you some ideas about what other faculty that have gone through the PLCs, what they have implemented in different size courses. And so maybe that can help kind of spur some of your ideas. And then I'd like for you all to share some things now that you do know what relationship rich is, or at least kind of a basic. Is there anything that you're like, yeah, I'm doing some things that you might want to share, or like, I was doing this and I don't do it as consistently, but I would like to, so we'll just spend the rest of the time kind of talking about that. I will share one of the PLC members in Camille Skubik-Poplaski. She's in my department. One of the things that she did was inspiring students to learn, and she has years of experience. She's definitely an expert in her field, pediatric occupational therapy, and she has won all these awards. Could definitely be an intimidating person because of her knowledge. I tell her that won't come as a surprise. I'm like, like everything I know and 100 times more about occupational therapy. So it could be intimidating to students. So she challenged her students to bring in a case study that she wouldn't get right. So the whole idea was like, basically how, like, bring something in that I don't know, and then we'll figure it out and learn it together is kind of, and so students were bringing in, and she said she got all kinds of like cool things. She got really unique, rare diagnoses. And then she said some of them brought in like obvious things that she thought were pretty simple. And I was like, did anyone stump you? And she was like, yeah, one really did. So she said, and kind of the idea behind it was that showing vulnerability, showing, we're people too. Even though we may know a lot in our content area, we don't know everything in our content area, and that it's okay to say, I don't know. And if you don't know, here's how we're going to figure it out together. And then just something fun that kind of facilitated back and forth dialogue that wasn't just like, here's a question, tell me the answer, like a traditional class. It was more of a casual dialogue. And she said the students thought that was really fun because she was, they were trying to stump her, and we're trying to, like, you know, work together to find something that was real rare, or, you know, trying to sneak in little things that she might have to catch as a clinician. Lindsay. Yeah. Is somebody raising their hand?
We have a comment in the chat. I'll read
Oh,
that
okay.
to you.
All right.
Are you good? This is from Corey, Black Eagle. He says, my course is flipped so that in the class, we are working as a community on lab activities. I work really hard to build this community by interacting constantly with my students in the class, as well as encouraging them to engage with each other, not only with the folks they sit next to, but across the room. They also choose the groups to work in all semester for full semester group projects. I frequently have students develop friendships with each other and come see me in subsequent semesters, telling me that they are still hanging out with the folks they met through my course. Additionally, I develop individual relationships with each and every one of them, and I get to know them, they get to know me as a person too. I know what is going on with them outside of the class. I encourage them and deal with each, and I deal with each of them, each student as an individual person. I often tell them I see the brilliance in you, and I want you to see the brilliance in yourself. And his course is also ungraded, so everything is focused on student questions, not his.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great example. That's a really good example of that, building the web of relationships, because those students are building relationships with each other that they can kind of take with them once they're out of the classroom. Are those classes large or small? Did you say that was Corey? Was who posted that, Fred?
Yeah, that's me.
Are the classes like really large classes, or do you think they would be more challenging with larger classes? Are they like mid-sized classes?
I teach right now. I'm teaching primarily Gen Ed. My courses satisfy that category 4 lab course in a natural science or something like that. So they're capped at 24 each. I have taught larger classes, not here at EKU. And I still am very interactive with my students. So the fact that I'm teaching a Gen Ed course, the fact that I have this cap at 24 per section makes it easier, but nonetheless, I work really hard to build relationships with students. So throughout my time teaching, I've had students that will confide things in me because they feel comfortable talking to me. I think that the thing that prevents this from happening more regularly is the emphasis on content over thinking. And so students are in this memorize, regurgitate, move on sort of approach, instead of, no, wait, I want to think, I'm allowed to think, and it's okay to think. And so I think that memorize, regurgitate, move on creates a barrier between students who are kind of competing with each other, as well as between students and faculty. And so one of the biggest benefits for me of going ungraded was we all could relax and just focus on students getting the most possible without having to worry about grades. So that's kind of a long-winded response.
No, I think you brought up a lot of really good points. One, that you said, I work really hard to build relationships. I think that's a testament of what I said before is that relationship-rich education is a pedagogy. It's just like if you were redesigning your course to implement some other type of teaching strategy. Just like if you would go and redesign all your assignments to use the tilt model and be transparent, or to use flipped classroom, or whatever pedagogy that you're using, it's effortful. It takes intentionality to really do this consistently. And I think Corey brings up a good point. Many people will have, or many faculty will have active learning maybe in their classroom occasionally, but it really, to really kind of shift it to a true relationship rich, it does take it over time. The students have to start feeling comfortable that this is really authentic, that the faculty really does want to build that relationship and that they build that trust. So I think you brought up a good point, Corey, that you are working hard to do this. It's not just a side thought. I also liked the conversation about thinking versus just regurgitating, because that's one of the principles, is they have to, students should be encouraged to kind of think big, right? That's an entire principle. And so creating environments that students can do that is necessary for relationship rich education. I also teach a ungraded course, and it is actually it's an internship, and so it's satisfactory, unsatisfactory. There is no grade for the course. It's completely set up pass fail. And I love that course because it is no longer, I can see a transition in the students. They'll call me and tell me about a concern on their internship, because it's not about, well, if I tell her that I did this wrong, I'm not going to get a B or a C. Like, I'm still going to pass the class. And so I can be more honest about what I'm having trouble with, if that makes sense. I found that to be true, that it kind of takes the pressure off. And it's about, I'm here to help you learn and be successful in your role as a clinician. Let's not worry about whether I'm going to take 2 points off here or 3 points off there. And I know that ungrading doesn't work for everything, but some of those, if you all ever go to any of the ungrading stuff that they have here at EKU, some of the concepts around ungrading are really useful in pairing with that relationship rich content.
If I can just add on to that.
Of course.
So, first of all, with ungraded, there are a couple of different approaches to ungraded. One of them that seems most popular on the EKU campus for the most part is contract grading. So to me, that's still kind of graded, because it's, you agree at the beginning of the semester that you're going to do X, Y, and Z, and that's what your grade is based on. And for me, I use Jesse Stommel's approach. If you're not familiar with Jesse Stommel, go look him up. Mine is completely ungraded. So the progress reports and the midterms are based on, are you doing everything I've asked you to do to the best of your ability? And the final grade is completely a negotiation between the individual student and me. And they present what they feel they've done and how well they've done it. And I talk to them about what I've seen in class, and then we literally negotiate as equal partners. And I found that students are so conditioned in K-12 education and in the traditional educational model that when they walk into my class, there's a lot of reassurance and scaffolding I have to do to convince them that I'm not kidding. I really want them to talk. I really value what they're thinking. And it takes about a month for them to trust me and trust the process enough that they will say, oh, I don't have to raise my hand to talk. I can talk to people at my table and it's not cheating. I can call out questions to the entire class, and that's not only okay, but I'm praised for doing it. I can actually get up and walk across the room if I want to talk to somebody. And I feel like the current academic model really works against building relationships with students. And to the point that I've been a professional geologist for 35 some years, and I knew that there was a critical need for earth science teachers. So I went back and I did a career switcher program and taught high school 9th graders for 6 years in Virginia. And what I was taught in the career switcher program was, don't laugh for the first half of the semester or first half of the year. Don't talk about who you are as a person. Don't do this, don't do that. The students need to have this message that what you say is what happens in class. And I just think that that whole mindset keeps us from building these valuable relationships and getting to know our students and us benefiting from it as much as the students do. So I'm not sure how we can break out of that, except my department chair has given me permission to do what I'm doing because she loves what she sees in my classroom. But I think there's a paradigm shift that needs to happen in education.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's not going to be a fast one for sure. You know, it's just going to be a slow trickle. And then hopefully one day we'll look back and we'll be like, oh, look how far we've come. And I think we've come far comparatively to, you know, maybe like when I was in college. There's definitely been big changes. Does anyone have any thoughts of anything that maybe they're not doing, but they might want to try to implement the next few weeks? Is anyone brave enough to, or do we still need time to kind of like think about it?
I have something.
Yeah.
So this is something that, so both myself and Elise here, we both work in the Center for STEM Excellence. And so we work with student partners that will either host workshops for students in certain classes, or they're embedded in those classes with students, and we'll work with them there. And one thing that we already kind of had on our radar that we're planning to work on over the next couple months is doing a shout out board for our student partners, so that basically anytime that either we or one of their teammates sees them doing something that, you know, goes above and beyond, or even, you know, is worthy of note for some reason, that we could then like make a note there and put it on the board for everybody to see that, you know, like this person, you know, was really successful at doing this or something like that. So
yeah, I love that. Recognition is always I mean, people just like to know that they're doing a good job and that their time is valued. So I agree. I think that's a good little thing that it's relatively easy to implement, right? You know, not costly. And so we've got a good example of like Corey, you know, really is trying to like change an entire culture in his classroom and is being really successful at that. And that's fantastic. And it can be on that level, definitely, but it's also little things, just kind of moving the margin, you know, little by little to something where students do feel like they're valued and that the people who are here are not just here to teach them, but are here to invest and have interest in their lives. An example of another PLC example that someone implemented was Dr. Randall Swain, I think political science, is that right? Teaches in political science, teaches gen ed. And he taught large gen ed courses, and he would stop his class like 20 minutes early and have meetings with small groups. So his class wasn't small enough that he felt like he could meet one-on-one with students, but but he would meet like with 5 of them at the end of class for like the last 15 minutes of class. So everyone else could leave. And then the 5 that was scheduled to meet with him, and it wasn't mandatory. They didn't have to. If they were like really opposed to meeting with him, it was fine that they left. But he said really pretty much everybody valued that one-on-one time, and it wasn't about the class. You know, they could mention how the class was going, but he tried to ask them a lot of questions about, you know, what's your dorm like? Do you like your roommate? You know, let me tell you something that happened to me this week. Those type of things. And so he talked about that the challenge was that he really had to look at his content, because over a whole semester, he lost a decent amount of time in his courses for lecturing, but he felt like getting the students to kind of trust him and have that relationship with him was more valuable. And he did teach a high, like a drop, fail, withdrawal course where a lot of people would, and he didn't want people to drop the course. That was his ultimate goal. And he was being successful in reducing the drop rate by implementing those little things. And he did relationship rich stuff throughout his courses, because again, he was invested in that anyway. But the real kind of main thing was those little, you know, team meetings at the end of class. So I thought that was a nice way to manage a larger class size. Well, our time is up, but think about little things that you want to change in your classes. I'll follow up with kind of an email about the web that has the website again for you. And when we meet again, we'll kind of talk about anything that you've done, any changes, and what challenges and successes that we've seen. All right. Go do great things.
Thank you.
Before you all leave, let me make sure that I have